All right, so I am here at my AOD, automatic overdrive transmission. Um, so I found out something cool tonight. Obviously, it's a very worked AOD. I feel like the AODs get kind of a bad rap. Um, like overdrive is a weak spot. I've messed up too in the past, but I didn't have control over the build. I'm not taking any credit away, but I have no idea what was really in those. You can buy a lot of different rebuild kits. Sometimes they depends on what clutches they come with, but the AOD has a lot of little tricks to do. It's not just a hardened input shaft or getting a one piece shaft from an AODE or like a hardened output. There's a lot of tricks. You really need, like, this one has a Sonex super holds servo piston and everything. Um, that was a beast to compress down on its spring. Um, but what that does is it gives that much more holding power over the overdrive band. You can upgrade to like a 2-inch band with the better drum, but um, I still have the stock width like 1.5 inches, but it's Kevlar, and obviously having the super hold servo makes a huge difference just on holding it into position. And then the clutches that I have in my that drum are, instead of 5 or 6, it's now 8 choline steel modules and 8 friction modules that are Alto Red Eagle. And then my 1, 2, 3 clutches are just Raybesta Stage 1 Reds. And the thing is, especially in an engine build like this, it's not always like going to the best possible thing isn't always the best, especially on the street. Like, you want something like a Stage 1 Red, because if you have like their blue series and you're not road racing or drag racing heavily, is the clutches can actually glaze over. So if you were to clone the powertrain, something with the lesser clutch may actually last longer. Um, so it's a modified AOD, but I think a lot of people like ignore it or opt for C4, and then getting in years outside of the AOD and AODE, people, the 4R7W worlds, like those are extremely strong transmissions out of the gate. But the AOD, with certain things, like instead of using a regular clip in the drive hub, you can get a spiral lock. So it's something that goes where just a regular lock with an opening would go, or clip, and it spirals in there a couple of times. And that's a weak point on these, to where even a stock HO engine has been known to break those. And you could lose like second gear. It's either first or second. I don't know. I don't remember. Uh, AOD is, I mean, any transmission, especially auto, it's a lot. Like, you can't even, like, just the actual clutches and mechanical action from the sun gears and planetary and so on, it can be complex as is, without even thinking about the actual like hydromechanical setup from the valve body and check balls and stuff like that. I had a new love and respect for transmissions after doing this. Like, it somehow is more interesting than even an engine, because an engine is that much less complicated. Um, so either way, when you're dealing with performance, or something like a built transmission, is it's not impervious, it's not invincible to heat, right? Something like this does have a TCI Street Fighter. It has an anti on the for the torque converter. It does have an anti-ballooning plate, so this thing is good to go. 500 plus foot-pounds. Its balloon plates are really more for nitrous, though. Like, that's really where you get into trouble, because if you're just, in the press of a button turning that power on at a certain point in the power band, that's when they tend to balloon. So that was set up in mind for forced induction, but now, it's a little future proofed. It is a lockup, so that means there are clutches inside of the torque converter. A couple advantages of the lockup is, unlike a non-locker, the lockup and the AOD in general, that means that it's in direct drive at 40 miles per hour. So what that means is, a normal rule of thumb with a non-lockup converter without a clutch inside of it is, you have to look at your cam's power range and what your cruising speed is going to be on the highway, right? So this van with 373s, it's going to be somewhere in the mid 2000s, maybe like 2.25 at highway speeds. I mean, luckily it's a van, so it's like, I don't feel necessary to go like 75. Like, I could go 65 and feel content. And I'm 8 feet tall out there, so it's not as intimidating as if you're going to drive that slow in like a car. But it'll probably do 70 just fine. Like, I've had 373s to an AOD, and it's the same ratio. It's really not that bad at highway speeds. Even 410s are still manageable. But either way, if this were a non-lockup and it's a 3000 plus, and again, that depends on your cam, the gearing, the weight of the vehicle, I think it'll be like 3000 plus. I don't think it's definitely not going to be lower than that. At the most, it would be like 3400, but I think it would need some, like, more, like a big block would probably do that for it. But basically what you would have to do with a non-locker to not build up heat is make sure that your cruising RPM are at that stall speed. So if this were a non-lockup and I wanted to go on the highway, realistically, and not to say you couldn't do it, but you would build a lot of heat. But the good rule of thumb would be like, all right, then you would want a 2000 stall. Because if those 373s are putting me at like, 2200 plus, then I would only want a 2000. So the beauty of using a lockup, even though non-lockup is more associated with racing, it does have its benefits. But for a street vehicle, just using the intended engineering of a lockup is smarter in some ways. Like, I was talking to someone who did use a high stall lockup in a T-Bird, and I think he was talking about how when he would be in the burnout box, like, he would get some judders or shaking. I can't remember, like, if he was holding it in first or what the deal was. But overall, what that means is, as soon as I'm over 40 miles per hour, I could be on the highway at 55, and now I don't have to worry about heat. So heat in a high stall is an issue, but heat overall in a transmission is what kills a transmission, at least the clutches and stuff like that. So not always like raw breakage that torque or power is going to bring you, but heat overall will destroy your clutches. So a couple things with this is, number one, it's using the top end. I mean, there's probably larger ones out there, but at least B&M's top shelf cooler, which is actually, I forget how many BTU, but it's a stacked plate. Stacked plate is better than finned. And I forget the dimensions, but it's sizable. It's pretty big. And my pan is actually a aluminum, I think, an LPW product. And you may see it under a different branding. I think that it's technically made in China, but it's actually a really nice casting. It's very thick for what it is, like 3/8 heavier than the steel pan. And it will never, ever rust. So this adds 2 quarts. So it takes a lot longer to heat up, 2 quarts. People argue, oh, well, it'll take that much longer to cool down. Well, if you're staying within reasonable temperature and not letting like extra capacity get to that, then it'll work fine. Either way, for this whole build, is one of the things that I wanted was, I have all those great gauge pods up on the dash. Part of it was because I was doing forced induction with water methanol, so I had my Snow Performance VC50 was taking up one of the pods, which is a really cool unit because it's a boost gauge and you control when the methanol kicks in and stuff like that. So now I'm not really doing that. Like, I've thought about maybe looking at e-turbo stuff in the future, but I have to kind of figure that out because it'll determine, where I'm going to set my ring gaps on my pistons. Like, you can run NA and have a bigger ring gap prepped for forced induction, but honestly, I kind of want to know now, because if I can have it set at something more ideal for NA, and then in the future, just, if I upgrade my heads or something like that, I can get pretty close to where I was going to be on 6 PSI anyway. So that was one of my things, was like, I want to monitor my engine oil temperature, transmission, and differential. The only thing is, when I would look for things like this bulkhead fitting, and this does have a temp sensor from the gauge set plugged in the back, this one comes with like a drain plug, so if you weren't using it for temperature, you do that. But how it works in a steel pan, and this one's going in my engine oil pan, is instead of threading a hole, like here's the drain plug that this comes with, so that's threaded into the casting, is you would make a 1/2-inch hole for it, and then this nut there locks that on, and then it does come with a nylon washer. Like, you'd probably want to put something around it, which even if you did get a small leak, like, it's obviously not going to go like a sieve. But what I found out, I don't actually know these sizes, I only know the temp sensor is 1/8 of an inch. But what's cool, that makes my life a little easier, is I found out this particular bulkhead actually is the same pitch and size as the stock drain plug for this pan. So if I wanted to run it there, boom, I have transmission oil temperature. And the cool thing about those Evo gauges is they have warning lights, which is awesome. So I can set like, okay, 200 degrees. I'd probably go a little less than that. Like, I don't want to, like, I'd probably do 180, but that way, as soon as it hits that red line, the gauge will go off, like that dying smoke detector behind me. It'll let you know that you're over temperature. So I love that idea. I love having, a premium gauge like that. But they do, I don't know if this is the spot, but they do have a boss that's machined into the metal. I think it is this spot. The only thing is it likely it's not intended, because this is 3/8 thick or whatever, is it wouldn't be intended for like using a sandwich like with a nut over that bolt. And I don't know, like, I'm sure a quality Irwin tap, so obviously doing it like here is probably expensive. Like, I can get like a cobalt drill bit. So I don't know, but I was thinking about it, and what I realized is, yeah, that's convenient, but when I started to think about where this is located, if I did do it this way, is that's pointing directly toward the ground, which obviously is not going to hit the ground. Like, yes, that this pan sits like 1 inch or 2 lower to the ground, but there's just something awkward about the fact that this would be sticking up. And I think you can imagine what could potentially happen if something hit that. Like, it'd have to be like a rock, and this is a street van for the most part. Like, maybe I'd be on gravel roads, like something like a campground road. So I don't know. It is convenient, but I'm debating if I should do, like, because the only thing is, like, I've machined a little bit. Like, I can tap holes. I have tapped in aluminum. Never one that large or that critical. So that's the only thing I'm worried about. Maybe I could go to a machine shop and pay him a little money, like less money than what the tooling would cost, because the taps are not cheap. Even for a quarter 20, you're still gonna pay like $20 for a nice quality set. And you don't want the Chinese ones. Even the thread cleaners are garbage. So I don't know. And unfortunately, like if this were the steel pan, I could weld some sort of protection, whether it's brush, rocks. So that is the only thing I'm thinking about. But other than that, that's pretty cool. The differential, unfortunately, isn't as easy. You can see this. So this is my diff cover. It is half a quart larger. It actually took like 3.25 quarts to fill the 8.8 rear, which I was surprised. I thought it was going to be like a quart less. The only thing is with the drain plug that is on this is it's like an odd, I forget the size, but I'm pretty sure it's metric because I took it to the hardware store and they were looking, they're like, oh, maybe it's pipe thread. And they're like, oh, it's metric because it's, all this stuff is Chinese. Fortunately, unfortunately, I don't know. It's really just how much markup they put on it sometimes. So it's not as easy as I wish it were just as simple as plugging an 1/8" sensor into the drain plug. So I have to figure that out. It's not as critical as I think as monitoring your transmission temperatures. Like in the 200 degrees Fahrenheit is kind of like the breaking point of probably basically every transmission. Oiling advances aside, like I'm going to be running Mercon V in this, which is totally fine. As long as it's Ford, like, don't get me wrong. There are other companies that make a Mercon V. But I guess the only one you want to run if it's an 80s or to 90 AOD is but even though the clutches are different, but you want Motorcraft, like Ford's brand, for doing this. Because these probably started on like the original Mercon or Mercon 2, and since then they've gone all the way up to like 5. Either way, 200 degrees is still kind of the rule of thumb. So the rear end and Eaton style posse that I have in there, and with 373s like that, still is using clutches with load springs. But to me, a carrier, that's a few $100 problem. A transmission can be a $2,000 problem. So to be able to, be like, okay, I'm not really worried about the temperature on the diff yet. I do want to get it at some point, but for braking, because it's already full of oil and ready to go, but I have to drive it, 150 miles or so and then change that out anyway. So maybe at that point I'll have it figured out and have something temperature I can put in there. But yeah, that's kind of my debate, because I don't want to mess up this pan either, and that's the identical pitch. So I just don't know. Like maybe I could put the transmission in dry, look at how that looks, and not necessarily bolt this all the way up. Well, it's start bolted, go in. Originally, I didn't really want to scratch this up, but it's just aluminum, so it's not like you have to worry about paint. But originally, I was going to reinstall the tranny with the steel pan on, but I don't know. I could probably get away with leaving some bolts out, but yeah, I just don't know. Like when I really think about that, because where these are sitting, like I can fit my shoulders under that crossbar, and that's sitting pretty low. So I don't know. It's an easy solution. Like, okay, that works. And the cool thing is you don't have to worry about pulling either, because there's technically 2 threads here, but the cool thing is you just would unclip it. And if you're doing an oil job on the transmission, the whole pan has to come off anyway, because you have to change the filter, just like an engine oil change, right? So I don't know. I could probably do it. Like I do at least have a guide block, but I don't think I have one up to a half an inch. Like I can't even make one out of wood because I don't have a drill press. You know, like you take wood and then you have a nice straight hole to guide you in. But the thing is, if that thing went cockeyed or anything, even with Teflon on it, like I don't know. But I'm pretty sure that is the intent. Like I wish I could just drill a regular hole like the oil pan that would fit in without having to potentially tap it. So I don't know. Maybe I'll call a machinist and be like, "Hey, I just need this size tapped in." And then just order another one of these things because it was like $12, another bulkhead, and I'm good to go. So anyway, that's my thoughts. Either way, I still like that I know that fits in case I thought it wasn't really an issue to have pointing downward, but it does. In when I really think about it, you know, the position, I'm like, But it just goes to show you, like on a project like this, there is so much attention to detail and things that you have to figure out and follow. Like this is why it takes so long. Like even these are the oil cooler lines going to that radiator. And even this was a pain in the ass. I forget what these were, if it's pipe thread size or if it's AN. But I had to find these 45 degrees. They are very pretty, right? I have like purple and blue anodized ones. But the thing is I had to like go around because the fill tube goes right in between that. And I was trying to make the most use out of the length of just having a single braided line. And these kits are like $80. And I rarely see these in different lengths. So if I had to double it up, there's going to be a lot of slack. So I don't know yet. But yeah, I wish I had more experience if it was as simple as like, oh, no big deal. I just have to tap some thread into that. But I definitely don't want to have that leaking. So I don't know yet. I'm sure the nylon washer takes a lot if you torque that in. But then you could always use silicone or something, or gasket maker. I don't know. Because then you could just, you know, if it's separate from the drain plug, then this never has to leave its hole. So, hell, if I could weld aluminum, I'd just weld it in there, honestly. But anyway. Oh, I did respray these. Don't look too bad. I love that they have these. These are my tweeter pods for my Pioneer Z's. They look pretty cool though. They kind of remind me of like 50s sci-fi. So not perfect. I hate working. These are wood and body fillers. How I did that. So I don't know. Maybe I'll make I'll make a separate video on that because I doubt anyone has gotten to 23 minutes here. But anyway, it's just really cool to have the ability to monitor all of your oils. Like it's kind of worth the stress when you think about it. When you can know everything and then set up warnings, you know, warning lights for temperature peaks and stuff outside of just water temperature and stuff like that. It's really cool. So I'd say it's worth it. And if I'm not confident, maybe if I decide I'm gonna make a new hole, I'll just call a machine shop. No big deal. So anyway, that's it for now. See you later.